In the land of Morrowind, there is the Great House Hlaalu, a house of dark elves, also known as Dunmer, and foreigners known for their progressive views in a very traditionalist province, and more so for their knack of trading and making business deals. You may know them from being one of the 3 great houses you can actually join in Morrowind, highlighting the stealth aspect of RPG builds, or you may know about House Hlaalu because of Crassius Curio, the man who wrote the illustrious Lusty Argonian Maid. If you want to truly understand House Hlaalu, their history, and what virtues they embody, fear not, for this video was made to satisfy you, so you can polish up on your lore. And there will be plenty of time to do so, my sweet. Plenty of time. Hello, my fellow hirelings of House Telvanni. I'm Neloth, and today we are going to go over the entire lore of House Hlaalu. Now, because I am of the superior House Telvanni, I would not have the most objective viewpoint when discussing the now disgraced House Hlaalu, which is why I have hired Hlaalu Hlaalu as an advisor and scholar to assist me in uncovering the secrets of this once great house. If you are wondering why her name is so similar to the house she serves, don't look at me, I'm not her fucking dad. Let's just accept this fact and dive straight in, shall we? So yes, House Hlaalu was one of the 5 great houses of Morrowind and was at one point the dominant house, leading the other great houses on the Grand Council, a position that was once held by House Indoril. And I say was because House Hlaalu ain't the top dog anymore, but that is a story saved for later. They are the house that is characterized by and obsessed with striking business deals and engaging in diplomacy no matter who they are with. So much so that silly things like, morality come second to the art of the deal, which is why many Dunmer view them as opportunistic and no better than thieves. And this is true to an extent, as many members of House Hlaalu are more than willing to take bribes and forge relationships with almost anyone, from the Empire and their various guilds to even the Kimona Tong, a crime syndicate I'll talk about later and maybe even devote a separate video to. However, Hlaalu feels it's important to note that there are many within House Hlaalu that object to thievery and murder. As is written in the book Grasping Fortune, written by Hlaalu Councilor Dram Barrow, when you see a chance to turn a profit, take it, but do not follow money blindly. There is value in reputation, more than many young Hlaalu realize. This value must be carefully balanced against the more tangible coins in any deal. Theft and murder are bad for business. You can steal from someone, but will he trade with you after that? You can't bargain with a dead man. Now, of course, not all within House Hlaalu follow this philosophy, but it goes to show you that House Hlaalu is not like the Thieves Guild, as they are more akin to a Merchants Guild, just with honest practices. House Hlaalu is also unique among the other great houses because while they all allow foreigners, outlanders, and even Enwas to join and rise through the ranks, even the sexy Telvanni, House Hlaalu is the only house with non-Dunmer councilors, including Crassius Curio, an Imperial, and Yngling half-troll, a Nord. This shows how House Hlaalu is far more willing to work with the other races, is welcoming of the Empire and its laws and customs, and also has a more cosmopolitan view of the world. Though it should be stated that House Hlaalu does not do this because they are humanitarians and morally superior, but rather they see this inclusiveness with the Imperial administration and the other races as far more profitable in the long run. The name of the game is making money and getting rich, while also valuing and recognizing the importance of a good reputation. This especially can be seen in their banners and heraldry, which is a merchant scale. This obviously showcases how close House Hlaalu is with merchants and business making, as scales were used by merchants to help measure an object's worth. But I also see it as symbolically showing how they carefully balance their love of making money with the desire to attain a good reputation, like walking a delicate tightrope. Each house also has a specific color that represents their faction, and for House Hlaalu, that color is yellow. which is why the house is also referred to as the Yellow Party, or the Yellow Hats. And Hlaalu says the color yellow just makes sense, since yellow and gold are very similar, and the gold coin, be it the Imperial Septim or the Morrowind Drake, are the lifeblood of economics and business. Originally, House Hlaalu was one of the weakest houses in Morrowind, and during the Second Era only held control over their ancient capital city of Narsis. While House Indoril seems to have dominated the region around them since their capital city of Mournhold was so close by. They also only ever had a small presence on Vvardenfell, consisting of just the port town of Seyda-Neen. In the Third Era, though, the power of the Hlaalu expanded drastically, and so did their territory. Keep in mind, this map here is not 100% lore accurate, but it's the best we have, and made by dedicated Morrowind fans and modders doing their best to be true to the lore. As we can see, House Hlaalu controls the most amount of territory, consisting of the central and southwest regions. This includes the city of Narsis, obviously, but also the cities of Ebonheart and Kraganmore, cities that originally belonged to House Drez. Though I would argue House Hlaalu has a stronger historical claim to Ebonheart, which I'll talk about much later. The Yellow Hats in the Third Era also controlled a larger portion of Vvardenfell in the southwest region, but ironically no longer controls Seyda-Neen, as that small port town was then owned by the Empire. Instead, they control the towns Suran and Balmora, the latter of which is treated as their capital on Vvardenfell. Interestingly enough, both of these towns were originally owned by House Redoran, showing that Hlaalu is used to taking territory from the other great houses. Something that makes Hlaalu very happy. Lucky for her, they didn't take lands from the Telvanni, unlike those Boethia-damned Indoril. The earliest account we have of House Hlaalu comes from the book Understanding House Hlaalu, written by Hlaalu Hlaalu, which Hlaalu sold to me at a fair price. By Azura, try saying that 10 times fast. The book mostly contains aspects of House Hlaalu we have already covered, like how they focus on trade and business and their love of bribery. However, the book begins by saying, written in the 121st year of the Golden Peace. Now, just like in my House Indoril video, there is no mention of the Golden Peace beyond these books. But I believe that the Golden Peace refers to when the Chimer, the golden-skinned elves that would eventually become the Dunmer, created the first council with the Dwemer and drove out the Nords from Morrowind in the year 416 of the First Era. Meaning this book may have been written in the year 537 of the First Era. To put it simply, House Hlaalu and the rest of the Great Houses can roughly trace their origins to the formation of the First Council, and the Succession Wars where the Nords got their asses handed to them. But, like all the other Great Houses, House Hlaalu really came into its own and stood out from the rest of the minor houses after the Battle of Red Mountain. A very complicated event that deserves its own video, but suffice it to say, this is when the Chimer kicked Nord ass again and turned into the Dunmer. When the Chimer changed from golden eyes and golden skin to red eyes and gray skin, this was naturally a very horrific moment for many. But since House Hlaalu looks towards the future and sees only opportunity, they quickly acclimated to their new conditions and with the rise of the Tribunal Temple. You might think that because House Hlaalu eventually embraced the Empire's customs and became friendly with not just the legions and guilds, but also the Imperial cult, that House Hlaalu would have an antagonistic relationship with the Temple and the gods Almalexia, Sothisil, and Vivec like they do with the other great houses. But in reality, Hlaalu tells me they have always been friendly and cordial with the Temple, not just because those yellow hats love a good reputation, but also because supposedly a counselor Hlaalu Nothak aided the Temple in reorganizing the house lands of Morrowind, renaming Mournhold to Almalexia, and planning to build Vivec City, possibly with Hlaalu gold and loans, since they are the richest house. However, it should be stated this information comes from the book Poison Song and is likely historical fiction, so take this with a grain of salt. Ignoring that, every Hlaalu town has a temple that is reasonably well kept, which is more than can be said for the Telvanni towns, as temples there are a barren wasteland. And when one joins House Hlaalu in Morrowind, members of the Tribunal Temple will have a slightly higher disposition towards you. Though while the temple may appreciate House Hlaalu, the tribunal gods themselves might not have the same disposition towards them, as Vivek himself will say, House Hlaalu represents the future of the Dunmer, integrated into the sophisticated mainstream of the traditionalist, raceless, godless culture of the Empire. Every great house also has a patron saint, someone who devoted their life to the temple and the Dunmer people. And House Hlaalu's patron saint is Saint Veloth, a prophet that led the Chimer, who would eventually become the Dunmer, from Somerset to Resdane, which would eventually be called Morrowind. In the mid-Second Era, an Akaviri invasion swept through both Skyrim and Morrowind, and the combined efforts of the Dunmer, Nords, and even Argonians drove them out. And afterwards, the three races created a military alliance called the Ebonheart Pact, which is totally not controversial in the Elder Scrolls community. This pact was formed as a way for the three races to better protect themselves against the chaos that was the events of the Elder Scrolls Online, and there was indeed a lot of chaos. And during the Three Banners War, many House Hlaalu warriors fought against and alongside others for control of Cyrodiil and the Imperial City, but were ultimately unsuccessful. 4 of the 5 houses signed the pact, including House Hlaalu, even though one of the terms of the pact was to abolish slavery. And House Hlaalu, like the rest, was not above using slave labor for profit, but they did publicly support both the pact and the abolition of slavery. Though again, this isn't because House Hlaalu was, moral and believed they were doing the right thing, rather they saw the way the winds were moving. And the Grand Master of House Hlaalu at the time chose to exploit all the opportunities offered by the Alliance. And these opportunities were likely dominant trade with Skyrim and Blackmarsh, and profiting from the Three Banners War by selling weapons, armor, and other war items for a premium as well. But once the Ebonheart Pact fizzled out and there was nothing left to exploit, House Hlaalu went right back to utilizing slavery. However, while there was opportunity and security, the Yellow Hats did lose most of their extraterritorial properties to the Daggerfall Covenant and Aldmeri Dominion. Now, as stated previously, House Hlaalu was really small during the Second Era, and even the Imperial Geographical Society reported that House Hlaalu was the smallest and weakest of the 5 clans. But even though they were small, House Hlaalu had plans. Big, carefully laid plans that would take years, decades, and even centuries to accomplish. One of these plans was entering into an alliance with House Redoran sometime before the events of ESO. In this alliance, House Hlaalu deferred to House Redoran in matters of defense, and House Redoran deferred to Hlaalu in matters of commerce and diplomacy. One of the products of this alliance was a construction agreement where House Redoran contracted House Hlaalu to provide labor and resources in building up the towns of Balmora and Suran. The cost of this contract was so low for House Redoran that they just had to accept it. However, they did not see that this contract was simply a long-term investment for House Hlaalu. See, rather than building these towns up using the Redoran architecture style, the Hlaalu construction crews used their architectural style instead. Not only that, but the contract gave the Hlaalu access to sources of raw materials throughout southwest Vardenfell, giving them a near monopoly. Meaning, House Redoran buys literally everything from House Hlaalu, so while the Redoran get poorer, House Hlaalu gets exceedingly richer, and gaining a doorway into these towns. House Hlaalu cleverly found a way to slowly wrestle both Balmora and Suran away from House Redoran, all through peaceful trade deals. And it worked, because during the events of Morrowind, we see that House Hlaalu controls these two towns, while House Redoran is stuck far to the north of Vardenfell. Hlaalu says this was one of the most masterful deals ever made by House Hlaalu, and she says it is still studied by their members to this day. The Yellow Hats were undoubtedly crafty, and what they lacked in strength, they made up for in being filthy fucking rich. But everything changed when Tiber Septim began conquering all of Tamriel, and after taking Hammerfell, he eventually set his eyes on Morrowind. Now, all of the great houses disagreed on how to deal with an impending imperial invasion. House Redoran wanted to fight them head-on, House Indoril and Dres wanted to retreat inward and wage guerrilla warfare, and House Telvanni was based and ignored the situation entirely. But House Hlaalu went against the fray and proposed that rather than fighting the Empire, they should welcome and accommodate them, as they saw the opportunity in making money from an imperial occupation. Then, something happened that shocked all of Morrowind. The god King Vivek appeared in his city and announced he had signed a treaty that would have Morrowind officially join the Empire. Nobody expected this, and most everyone was upset in some way, shape, or form except for House Hlaalu, who welcomed the Empire with open arms. The Lord High Counselor of the Grand Council, who was of House Indoril, refused to accept the treaty, and so he was assassinated and replaced with a member of House Hlaalu. So House Hlaalu went from being the weakest to ruling over all the rest. House Hlaalu also used this momentum to their advantage and took even more power from House Indoril, taking over many local Indoril positions and territories in bloody coups d'etats. Not only that, but many nobles of House Indoril chose to commit suicide rather than face imperial rule, which left even more of House Indoril's power lying around, power that House Hlaalu quickly snatched up. Now, you think that would be the end of the Hlaalu power streak, but you would be wrong, as one of the terms of the treaty was that the Emperor would install a king within Morrowind that would rule more or less as a figurehead. These rulers would be personally chosen by the Emperor himself, and I'll give you a guess which great house all these rulers hailed from. That's right, House Telvanni! Nah, that's not true, but I wish. They hailed from House Hlaalu. To say that House Hlaalu became the most powerful and dominant house in Morrowind would be an understatement. Mass expansion of territories in Redoran, Dres, and Indoril lands, premium trade deals with the Empire like mining ebony in the town of Caldera, and having a Hlaalu in near every authoritative position in Morrowind, including the positions of Duke and King. And in the late Third Era, they even installed a Hlaalu merchant named Andel Indaris to become the Count of Cheydinhal, a city in Cyrodiil close to Morrowind's border. So their authoritative power extended beyond Morrowind. House Hlaalu at the height of its power was very tight with both the Empire and many foreigners, especially since I said before at least 2 Outlanders were Hlaalu Councilors. But there was a dark side to House Hlaalu during this time, and no, I don't mean bribery or stealing, since that is to be expected of these yellow hats. Rather, during the late Third Era, House Hlaalu was firmly in bed with a crime syndicate known as the Kimona Tong, a Dunmerry crime family that engages in robberies, extortions, smuggling, drug trafficking, kidnappings, beatings, torture, murder, and pretty much every crime under the fucking sun, even forcing slaves to swallow bags of drugs so they can be transported elsewhere and slaughtered so they can rip the drugs out of their stomach. The Kimona Tong, simply put, are horrifyingly evil, unlike House Telvanni, who are comically evil. And the Kimona Tong are also ultra-nationalist in the sense that they feel Morrowind should only belong to the Dunmer and desire to kill all Outlanders within Morrowind. So how is it that the Kimona Tong of all people have strong ties to the Outlander and Empire-loving House Hlaalu during the Third Era? Well, there are a few reasons. First, the Kimona Tong loves making money just as much as House Hlaalu, so this crime syndicate intermingling with the Great House makes sense from a business perspective. This is why Hlaalu Councilors Nevena Ulez and Valanda Omani are bought and paid for by the Kimona Tong and won't lift a finger without their approval. Second, the Kimona Tong might hate Outlanders, but they aren't above using them to make money. For example, during ESO, there were a group of orcs led by an abolitionist named Kartag who had an operation of smuggling slaves out of Morrowind for a small price. And when the Kimona Tong found out about this operation, they wanted a piece of the action, but were demanding the orcs increase their prices and use immoral tactics for transporting the slave escapees. And the third reason is the leader or kingpin of the Kimona Tong at this time was Orvis Dren, who is the younger brother of Vidam Dren, who was not just the Duke of Vardenfell, but Grand Master of House Hlaalu, the leader of House Hlaalu, at least on Vardenfell. Vidam is aware of his brother's criminal background, and while he does try to stop some of his illicit deals, he doesn't go too far since he loves his brother and doesn't want him hurt. Though Orvis, on the other hand, doesn't feel the same way and is considering assassinating his brother since he is trying to put a stop to some Kimona Tong business. And it also doesn't hurt that Orvis is next in line to become the Duke of Vardenfell and maybe even Grand Master of House Hlaalu. Not just that, but Orvis has also allied himself with the devil Dagoth and has even spoken with him and agreed with his vision of the future. So Orvis is personally manipulating House Hlaalu to the whims of Dagoth at least until the Nerevarine puts a stop to it. It is unknown if Orvis Dren was killed by the Nerevarine or if he was coerced into working with them, but his leadership over the Kimona Tong and influence over House Hlaalu was without question. The Kimona Tong is a part of Hlaalu history that dear Hlaalu finds absolutely abhorrent and shameful. While there is a very dark side to House Hlaalu, there is also a light side, because Duke Vidam Dren also has a daughter named Ilmeni Dren. And Ilmeni is not just a high-ranking member of House Hlaalu, but actually the leader of a secret abolitionist organization called the Twin Lamps that is dedicated to freeing slaves and helping them escape Morrowind. She works with Kalaya and other Argonians at the Argonian embassy in Ebonheart to safely transport them. This naturally puts Ilmeni at odds with her uncle Orvis, since he owns a massive plantation that uses much slave labor and uses slaves as drug mules. And one of Ilmeni's plans involve rescuing a slave that knows secret things about Orvis. Things Ilmeni can use to blackmail him. Likely Orvis's plans to kill Vidam, since the Nerevarine can also blackmail him using that same information. So, while there is a very dark side to House Hlaalu, there is also a small light side to it, and if you join House Hlaalu in Morrowind, you can both aid the Twin Lamps and kill Orvis Dren and fight the Kimona Tong with the Thieves Guild, making sure House Hlaalu gets back to the good kind of corruption. This also shows that not all Dark Elves are xenophobic, racist slavers like some sky babies would have you believe. Especially since Ilmeni is the highest echelon of Dunmer nobility and instead lives down by a canal wearing common clothes and only uses her privileges to help slaves. Since we are discussing characters associated with House Hlaalu, it might be time to put a magnifying glass on many prominent members of the house. Specifically, the counselors we can meet in Morrowind. The most famous counselor within House Hlaalu is definitely the sexually deviant Crassius Curio, an Imperial known for asking the player to give him a kiss in order to be named Hortator, asking the player to undress in front of him so that he will agree to sponsor them further into House Hlaalu, and being the infamous writer behind The Lusty Argonian Maid, a book I'm sure you know well. Even Hlaalu is blushing just from hearing the title. But while Uncle Crassius, as he refers to himself as, is an eccentric individual, he is actually one of the most capable and incorruptible members of House Hlaalu. as if you, the player, keep him informed on the illicit business dealings of an Odral Helvi, he will basically screw him over at every turn without this Odral even knowing. Before being a part of the house, Crassius was broke and homeless and had no prospects. So he begged a family of Dunmer known as the Aranos to offer him a place to stay within their home, and he fully expected to be turned away, but he wasn't. Instead, Crassius was allowed into their home, and he made the most of their generosity by working his way into the heights of House Hlaalu. The Arano family were then part of House Hlaalu, but on Solstheim we can see they were fully cemented within House Redoran. In Raven Rock, it appears Sindiri was very close to Crassius, though in this one circumstance I don't think it was in an intimate way. Dram Barrow is the only other Hlaalu Councilor that isn't completely corrupt. He is incredibly reclusive as he hides in the basement of a seemingly abandoned haunted manor, but he is referred to as shrewd and diplomatic and is the author of the book Grasping Fortune, which is a very useful book for understanding House Hlaalu. So useful, in fact, that this book technically transcends time, as the book Understanding House Hlaalu, which I mentioned earlier in this video, was written in the First Era and references Dram's book. Though Crassius Curio's book, The Lusty Argonian Maid, also transcends time as well, since you are able to read it during ESO, but that's a topic for a very different video. Dram Barrow is very generous as well, as you can tell him about a lost ebony mine ripe for the taking, and Dram will give you a Daedric weapon of your choice, regardless of your level. Sadly, the Morag Tong have a writ of execution on him, so his odds of survival after Morrowind are dubious at best. Valanda Omani and Nevena Ulez are two Dunmer women who are counselors, and both are under the thumb of Orvis Dren and his Kimona Tong, and therefore super corrupt. Not much to say about these two, however, Valanda is more generous than Nevena, as if you tell either of them about the lost ebony mine instead of Dram, Valanda will give you 2,000 gold and Nevena will give you fucking nothing. Both rewards being laughable compared to Dram Barrow's Daedric arsenal. Lastly, there is Yngling Half-Troll, the only other Outlander counselor aside from Crassius. We don't know how he came to be such a high-ranking counselor, but we do know that while he is not associated with the Kimona Tong, he is extremely corrupt and not well liked. The biggest and admittedly only crime we know that Yngling engages in is stealing money from the tribunal, money that was supposed to be spent on restoring a temple. Instead, he used this money to fund his other endeavors, one of which is training up rats to fight each other for betting purposes. What's funny is that Crassius will say that if you were to kill Yngling, not a single person would care. Mostly because he does not understand the ways of the Dunmer. Which makes you wonder, how the fuck did this Swit of a Nord become a Hlaalu Councilor? House Hlaalu pretty much infiltrated every level of power within Morrowind, with the Emperor even installing kings and queens in Morrowind during the Third Era that were of the Rathim clan, who were a prominent family of Chimer that were eventually absorbed into House Hlaalu. Before the Emperor personally installed puppet kings in Morrowind, the Rathims ruled as kings within the city of Ebonheart during the First Era, and had many trade deals with the Bretons of High Rock. The First Era Rathim kings included King Cronin, King Cruethus, Witch King Morelin, Queen Leon, and a couple of others, all of whom were still Chimer. However, the practice of having a king in Ebonheart, and really Morrowind in general, fell out of practice with the rise of the Great Houses and the Tribunal. But after Morrowind became a part of the Empire, Tiber Septim appointed a Queen Baronzaya to Morrowind, though her position was just ceremonial. Queen Baronzaya has a long and extremely complicated history and jumps from looking like a Breton in Daggerfall to a Dark Elf in Morrowind, but suffice it to say, she was also part of the Rathim line, and after some time went into exile due to unrest and abdicated the throne to her uncle Athan Lathan. Not much is known about Athen except he was a Hlaalu noble and revoked a tribunal temple ban on trade and settlement in Vardenfell as king, allowing both Imperial and House Dunmer colonists to pour into Vardenfell and build new settlements and expand old ones. For this reason, he was not a well-liked king within Morrowind. He was married to a Dunmer named Ravani, and while he never had any children, he had a nephew named Talon Vandus whom he treated like a son and named him his successor. But all that changed when Queen Baranziah, and more importantly her son Helseth, came back to Morrowind from High Rock after Helseth failed to gain the Wayrest throne. Athen welcomed them both back with open arms, and while Baranziah wanted to retire and had no desire to become queen again, Helseth had far greater ambitions. Shortly after arriving in Mournhold, Talon Vandus was supposedly killed during a hunting trip, and Athen was killed quote-unquote by natural causes. Now, this timing is quite suspicious, but it could have just been a coincidence, right? Well, when Helseth was in High Rock, he was known for blackmailing, bribing, and especially poisoning and killing people to get his way. Like, a lot of people. And the now widowed Ravani and others firmly believe that Helseth killed Athen and Talon, as do many in Morrowind, but not many people cared that much since he wasn't that well liked. While Helseth is of House Hlaalu, he was an outlander through and through, not being born in Morrowind, being pro-imperial, and looking down on Dunmer culture, even surgically altering his elven ears to resemble that of a human's. Even as king, he made frequent use of poisoning and even using the Dark Brotherhood to kill people, even the Nerevarine, though that assassination attempt did fail spectacularly. While Helseth was a vicious bastard, he did use his power as king and a member of House Hlaalu to form an alliance with House Drez, and afterwards renounce the slave trade, though I believe few Dark Elves actually listened to the king, even those within House Hlaalu. Fun fact, but Carlia, everyone's favorite Dunmerry thief, is actually the granddaughter of Baranziah and a part of the Rathim clan and House Hlaalu through lineage. Not that she cares about such things, she only ever cares about Nocturnal. I'll be honest, the kingship is probably my least favorite aspect of Morrowind lore, but it felt important to talk about given their relationship with House Hlaalu. Now, we've talked extensively about the rise of House Hlaalu and its many individuals within, but all good things must come to an end, so I think it is time we talk about the fall of House Hlaalu. When the Oblivion Crisis happened, almost all of the provinces were affected severely, especially Morrowind, and the Empire did very little to help protect Morrowind from the invasion. Though this was likely because the Empire was weak and stretched to its breaking point, unable to be everywhere at once. Instead, House Redoran, with the assistance of the beautiful House Telvanni, organized militias and helped close many Oblivion gates until the crisis ended. House Redoran were hailed as heroes, and House Hlaalu lost some power as a result of this, since neither them nor their beloved empire actually aided Morrowind in their time of need. 5 years later, the giant volcano in the middle of Vardenfell called Red Mountain erupted, and brought further destruction to all of Morrowind, especially the island of Vardenfell. This event became known as the Red Year. The Hlaalu-owned cities like Balmora and Suran were annihilated, which meant the Hlaalu lost considerable money and territory, weakening them further. And if that wasn't bad enough, shortly after the Red Year, Morrowind was invaded by Argonians from Blackmarsh for a multitude of reasons, and they killed many a Dark Elf in the process. Once again, House Redoran rose up to organize and form militias to drive the Argonians back, while the Empire and House Hlaalu didn't do fucking shit. Morrowind never liked the Empire that much to begin with except for House Hlaalu, so with that and the combination of the Empire not providing aid to their numerous calamities, Morrowind ceded from the Empire and became independent once again. And the Empire did nothing to stop them as they were too weak to do anything about it. At this point, House Hlaalu lost a considerable amount of territory, business, and political power, especially with their imperial daddies officially gone. And House Hlaalu became a scapegoat for everything going wrong in Morrowind and the people suffering for admittedly understandable reasons. Due to all this, House Hlaalu was dismissed from the Grand Council and was no longer recognized as a great house. And they were instead replaced with House Sadris, a house we know very little about. But it is very likely that many members of House Hlaalu did not go quietly and were assassinated or killed in bloody coups. An ironic fate given they did the exact same thing to House Indoril when they replaced them. And you can bet your sweet ass if Helseth wasn't already killed by the Nerevarine, he was definitely assassinated when the Yellow Hats were dismissed. Those who were a part of House Hlaalu either fled Morrowind to other provinces like Skyrim, as we can encounter Balin Hlaalu in Windhelm and Naluva Hlaalu in Riften. Some joined the other great houses, as Adril and Sindiri Arano's family once belonged to House Hlaalu, as they were the family to bring Crassius Curio into the fold. But there were some that stayed in Morrowind and held bitter resentment towards House Redoran for replacing them, even attempting to assassinate Redoran members out of revenge. On Solstheim, we can read from the books History of Ravenrock and find out that Villar Ulen, a member of House Hlaalu, attempted to assassinate Councillor Laeral Morvain in order to send a message to the Redoran Council, but failed and was executed. But that wasn't the end, as Villar Ulen's son, Vendil, infiltrated Ravenrock and planned to avenge his father by killing Councillor Morvain under the guise of the Severin family, with his supposed wife Tilsu and daughter Miri not being his actual family members, but instead agents of the Morag Tong, a group of assassins Vendil trained under as well. However, this plot was put down by that Dragonborn everyone boasts about. House Hlaalu is probably the most storied great house, as we have seen them when they were the weakest of the great houses. We saw them again when they were the most powerful, and again when they fell from grace and are now little more than refugees and vengeful cutthroats, falling even further from grace than even House Indoril, and those guys could never catch a break. But when you think about it, the downfall of House Hlaalu seemed inevitable, as they put all their cards on the Empire. But if the Empire isn't there to protect them and bail them out, they have nothing. Sure, they might have money, but many in House Hlaalu forgot to listen to Dram Barrow when he said that reputation was everything. And they sullied their reputation in Morrowind numerous times in favor of appeasing outside markets. This goes to show you that money cannot buy everything, a lesson that Hlaalu now takes to heart. And that is all I wrote, a video where I discuss the entire lore of House Hlaalu and discuss almost every aspect of them. A big thank you to Hlaalu Hlaalu for assisting me in gathering information for this video. I'm starting to realize her payment was a bit steeper than I anticipated, but getting swindled by a Hlaalu is to be expected, as we've learned throughout this video, and I can always rob her blind when she least expect it. That was a joke, Hlaalu, don't take that so seriously. This video was much larger than my House Indoril video, but that is to be expected since we can actually join House Hlaalu in Morrowind while House Indoril doesn't even have much of a presence. I hope you learned a great deal about House Hlaalu, and stay tuned because I will eventually get around to making a lore video on House Redoran, then the sexy House Telvanni, then the Drez, and then another house that shan't be named. But you know who I will name? My channel members who support House Telvanni in all its endeavors, and they are Mirak, Sovdark, Will Ernst, The Proud Prince, JJ Ensid, Milani Stilla, Grud, Ranger McKay, Luxie, Carson Friday, Abdullah the Goat, David Correa, Kirill Gaming, Dalton Rupert, I Love House Hlaalu, Felix Rianis, Cosmo, Jarinish Evento, Grabowski, Serene Molly, Smooth Weaver Walkthroughs, Bane Hellborn, Katie Harper, Shinigami James, Gret, The Ember Raven, Peter Illing, Joel Rhaenyra Targaryen, Awea Ann, Winter Raven 37, Blood of Cheese, Vivid Void, Argentis, Ilya J, Drink Tea With Me, Metal Health, Tonic, The Cold Storm, and 24 Seconds. So with all that being said, make sure to like the like button, like the subscribe button, and like the bell notification down below to be updated on future videos. And I will see you whenever the fuck I decide to upload again. House Telvanni be with you.
I suppose you want to be asked nicely. Very well. Please, O hero of Skyrim, I shall be ever so grateful.